If the world ever calls me a monster, promise me you'll let him live long enough to learn the truth." The rain swallowed her whisper before anyone else could hear it. It fell in relentless sheets through the ancient pines, drumming against leaves older than kingdoms, washing crimson streaks into the dark earth beneath her bare feet. Lightning cracked across the midnight sky, turning the forest silver for the briefest heartbeat before plunging everything back into darkness. Evelyn Carter stumbled forward, clutching the tiny bundle against her chest as though her own heartbeat alone could keep it alive. The child did not cry. That frightened her more than the wolves howling somewhere beyond the trees. His little face was pale beneath the soaked blanket embroidered with the royal crest, a silver wolf beneath a crescent moon. Rainwater gathered on his tiny lashes, and every few moments she bent low enough to feel the faintest warmth of his breath against her trembling cheek. Still alive. Thank the moon goddess. Still alive. Behind her, distant horns echoed through the mountains. Royal hunters. They were getting closer. Branches lashed against Evelyn's arms as she forced herself deeper into the forbidden forest, her soaked dress snagging on thorn bushes that tore the delicate fabric without mercy. Every burning scratch across her skin reminded her of the nightmare she had escaped barely an hour ago. The palace corridors. The blood. The screams. The whispered command that had frozen her soul. Tell the Alpha King his son was born dead. Dead. She squeezed her eyes shut for one agonizing second. No, the prince had not been born dead. Someone had wanted him dead. She had seen the poison hidden beneath polished smiles. She had seen hands reaching for the newborn before his first breath had fully settled into his tiny lungs. And she had run. She did not know whether fleeing the palace had been bravery or madness. Perhaps both. Another flash of lightning illuminated the forest. There. The old tree. It towered above the surrounding woods, impossibly massive, its trunk split by centuries of storms until a hollow chamber yawned within its heart. Villagers spoke of it only in frightened whispers. They believed ancient spirits slept inside its roots. Tonight, Evelyn prayed they were kind. She dropped to her knees before the opening, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Damp moss softened the wooden floor inside, surprisingly dry despite the storm outside. She quickly spread her cloak across the hollow before carefully laying the tiny prince upon it. "I'm sorry," she whispered, brushing rain-soaked strands of dark blonde hair away from her face. The baby stirred. A tiny hand escaped the blanket. His fingers wrapped around hers with astonishing strength. Something inside her chest shattered. "I know you're cold." Her voice cracked. "I know you're frightened." She swallowed hard, fighting tears she could no longer control. "But if they find you..." She could not finish the sentence. She had watched powerful men murder for far less than a royal heir. Outside, another wolf howl rolled through the valley. Closer now. Very close. Evelyn hurriedly removed the silver pendant from around her neck. It was the only thing her late mother had left behind, a simple moonstone wrapped in worn leather. She tucked it beneath the baby's blanket. "So you'll never be alone." Her fingertips lingered against his tiny forehead. "You'll hate me one day." A sad smile trembled across her lips. "You'll wonder why your mother abandoned you." Another painful pause. "But surviving is worth being misunderstood." She leaned forward and kissed his forehead. The baby's tiny eyes fluttered open. Winter silver. Exactly like his father's. For one impossible second, the infant simply looked at her. Not crying. Not afraid. Only watching. As though somehow he understood. Evelyn's composure finally broke. Tears spilled freely down her cheeks. "I wanted you to grow up in a palace." She laughed softly through the tears. "With tutors. Horses. A warm bed. And a father who loved you." Instead, she looked around the hollow tree. A bed of moss. Old roots. Silence. "I failed you." The words barely escaped her lips. Then she heard it. Hooves. Dozens of them. Metal armor clashing. The Alpha King's soldiers. They had found her trail. Evelyn instinctively shielded the child with her body before forcing herself to stand. She took one final look at the tiny prince. Every instinct screamed at her never to leave him. Every instinct screamed louder to run. If they captured her beside the child, neither of them would survive until dawn. She stepped backward. One step, then another. The baby reached outward with his tiny fingers, almost as though asking her not to go. Her knees nearly gave way. "I promise you." Her voice trembled with every word. "I will come back, no matter how many years it takes. I will never stop looking for you." She gently pulled a curtain of hanging ivy across the hollow entrance until the ancient tree looked untouched once more. Only then did she turn away. The storm swallowed her small figure as she disappeared between the towering pines, carrying nothing except soaked clothes, shaking hands, and a secret heavy enough to destroy a kingdom. Minutes later, mounted soldiers burst into the clearing. Their torches swept across the forest floor. Captain Rowan Blackthorn dismounted first, examining the muddy footprints disappearing into the darkness. "She can't have gone far," he growled. "Spread out. Search every cave, every stream, every tree." Dozens of soldiers obeyed without hesitation. None of them noticed the ancient hollow only a few steps away. Inside its weathered heart, wrapped in a faded cloak and protected by silence older than kings, the missing prince slept peacefully through the storm. Far above the forest, thunder rolled across the mountains. And somewhere beyond the rain, a father who had just been told his son had died stared into the darkness, never imagining that the child he mourned was still breathing beneath the roots of the oldest tree in his kingdom. 3 years can bury a secret beneath leaves and silence, but they can never bury the truth forever. Before we continue, if stories of courage, sacrifice, and destined love move your heart, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these stories find those who need them most. 3 years later, the kingdom no longer spoke the young prince's name. Not aloud. People lowered their voices. Whenever the tragedy surfaced, as if grief itself could summon misfortune. Mothers pulled their children closer whenever they passed the towering walls of Blackwood Citadel. Merchants ended conversations with awkward silence whenever the Alpha King's heir was mentioned. Even wandering bards had quietly removed the sorrowful ballad from their performances. Some stories became legends. Others became warnings. This one became both. Snow drifted gently across the stone courtyards of the royal citadel, softening the harsh edges of towers that reached into an iron-gray sky. Winter had ruled the northern territories for weeks, covering forests and villages beneath a silent blanket of white. Yet inside the throne room, winter felt warmer than the man who ruled it. Alpha King Damien Blackwood stood before the enormous window overlooking his kingdom. Tall, motionless. His long black cloak barely stirred despite the cold wind creeping through the cracked stone arches. Silver light reflected in his pale eyes, making them appear almost lifeless. 3 years had changed him. Not by adding wrinkles. Not by slowing his strength. But by stealing something invisible. Hope. The council members stood several feet behind him, careful never to interrupt the silence unless commanded. No one dared. Damien had once been known as a fearless warrior whose victories united fractured packs beneath a single banner. He had laughed freely then. Soldiers remembered hearing that laugh echo across training fields after successful battles. No one alive inside the palace remembered its sound anymore. "My king." Lord Cedric Ashbourne bowed carefully. "The eastern villages request additional grain before the next snowfall." No answer. "The southern border reports another rogue attack." Still nothing. Cedric exchanged an uneasy glance with General Rowan Blackthorn. Every morning followed the same ritual. Reports. Orders. Silence. Damien finally spoke without turning around. "Approve the grain." His voice was calm. Too calm. "And double the border patrol." "Yes, Your Majesty." The council bowed immediately. Business continued. Justice was delivered. Taxes were lowered after poor harvests. Trade routes expanded. The kingdom prospered beneath Damien's rule. Yet everyone understood one painful truth. Their king ruled with fairness. Never with joy. As the council prepared to leave, Damien's eyes drifted toward the small silver wolf carved into the windowsill. A toy, barely larger than his palm. Its ears had been worn smooth from countless nights resting beneath his fingers. No servant dared move it. No one admitted who had carved it. Some whispered the queen had commissioned it before childbirth. Others believed Damien had carved it himself during the sleepless weeks after the funeral. Only he knew the truth. He reached down almost unconsciously. His thumb brushed across the tiny wooden wolf. For a heartbeat, his breathing faltered. Then the memory returned. A newborn wrapped in royal silk. A tiny face he had never truly seen. A physician's trembling voice. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty. The prince was born without breath." He had believed them. He had buried an empty cradle instead of raising a son. Behind him, Rowan hesitated before speaking. "My king." Damien released the carving immediately. "What is it?" Our scouts returned from Hollow Pine Forest. For the first time that morning, Damien turned. His silver eyes narrowed. They found unusual tracks. Wolves. No. Rowan frowned. A child. Silence settled across the chamber. A child. Damien repeated quietly. Deep inside Hollow Pine. Nearly 3 days from the nearest village. Living alone? Rowan shook his head. Not alone. He unfolded a weathered map across the table. Our scouts discovered signs of someone surviving there for years. A hidden garden. Fresh animal traps. A small cabin concealed beneath vines. Damien stepped closer. Years. Not weeks. Years. Bandits? We found no weapons. Witches? No evidence. Then who? Rowan looked uncertain. There was something else. He placed a tiny leather shoe onto the map. Child-sized. Beautifully repaired countless times by careful hands. Not the work of criminals. Not the work of hunters. The stitching was delicate. Patient. Almost motherly. Damien picked it up. His thumb traced the uneven seam where someone had lovingly sewn the worn leather together again instead of replacing it. Whoever had raised that child had loved him. A strange sensation stirred inside Damien's chest. Not grief. Not anger. Something older. Something instinctive. His wolf shifted uneasily beneath his skin. It had not reacted like this in years. Without warning, the great beast inside him lifted its head. Mine. The growl echoed through his soul. Damien froze. His wolf had hunted enemies. Protected borders. Fought rival alphas. Never had it reacted to the scent of an unknown child. General Rowan noticed the sudden tension. My king. Damien slowly looked toward the snow-covered forest beyond the window. Somewhere inside those endless white pines, a child had survived unnoticed for 3 winters. Impossible. Unless someone had been willing to sacrifice everything to keep him hidden. Prepare my horse. My king. I'll lead the search myself. Cedric stepped forward nervously. Your Majesty, surely a patrol can know. The single word silenced every objection. Damien fastened his sword across his back. His expression remained unreadable. Yet something had changed. For the first time in 3 years, his eyes were no longer empty. Far beyond the castle walls, deep inside Hollow Pine Forest, a little boy with silver eyes laughed as he chased falling snowflakes between ancient trees. Nearby, Evelyn Carter smiled softly while repairing the sleeve of his winter coat, completely unaware that fate had already begun walking toward them with the heavy footsteps of an alpha king who still believed his only son had died on the night he was born. Some children are raised inside castles. Others are raised inside the hearts of those willing to lose everything for them. Morning sunlight slipped through the towering pines, scattering ribbons of gold across the forest floor. Tiny droplets clung to evergreen branches like crystals, sparkling each time the breeze whispered through Hollow Pine Forest. The hidden cottage remained almost invisible beneath climbing ivy and moss-covered stones. That was exactly how Evelyn wanted it. Invisible things survived. Visible things became targets. She pushed open the crooked wooden door, carrying a basket filled with herbs gathered before sunrise. The familiar scent of cedarwood and fresh bread wrapped around her like an embrace. Mama! A blur of silver and brown rushed across the tiny room. Before Evelyn could set down the basket, A small boy launched himself into her arms with enough force to nearly knock her backward. She laughed. A real laugh. One the world beyond the forest had never heard. There you are. She kissed the top of his soft, silver blonde hair. I thought I told someone to stay inside. Lucas looked up with wide, brilliant silver eyes. I did. His tiny smile widened. But then Mr. Rabbit came outside. And naturally, Evelyn teased, pretending to sigh. You had no choice but to rescue him. He was lonely. She smiled without answering. That sounded exactly like him. At 3 years old, Lucas possessed an impossible kindness that constantly frightened her. He apologized to flowers after accidentally stepping on them. He shared his food with injured birds. He cried whenever a fox caught a rabbit because he believed both animals deserved dinner. The world beyond Hollow Pine would destroy a heart like that. Unless she could teach him to stay gentle without becoming weak. She knelt to remove his wool gloves. His little fingers were cold. You've been outside longer than 5 minutes. Lucas lowered his head. Maybe? 8. Silence. 10. He quietly held up all 10 fingers. Evelyn shook her head, trying not to smile. What am I going to do with you? You could hug me again. Her heart melted instantly. She hugged him tighter. Every morning began this way. Breakfast together. Lessons afterward. Reading beside the fireplace. Afternoons spent tending the tiny vegetable garden hidden beneath towering pines. Evenings watching stars through the clearing near the ancient hollow tree. Simple. Peaceful. Dangerously beautiful. Lucas climbed onto the old wooden stool while Evelyn stirred oatmeal above the fire. Mama? When will I meet my father? The wooden spoon stopped moving. Only for a heartbeat. Then Evelyn forced herself to continue stirring. What makes you think about that today? Lucas shrugged. Oliver had a father. Oliver. The young deer that wandered into their garden every spring. He protected him. Lucas rested his chin on folded arms. And birds have fathers. So do wolf pups. His voice became quieter. Do I? Pain moved silently across Evelyn's face. She turned before he could see it. You do. Where is he? She stared into the dancing flames. Some lies protected children. Others only delayed heartbreak. Far away. Does he know me? The spoon slipped from her fingers. It landed softly against the edge of the pot. She closed her eyes. No, he doesn't. Because I made sure he never could. Evelyn turned back with the gentlest smile she could manage. Sometimes adults become separated. But that doesn't mean they stop loving. Lucas considered her answer carefully. The way only children could. So, if he met me, he wouldn't be angry? Her throat tightened. Angry? No. Heartbroken. Confused. Perhaps grateful. Perhaps furious. She honestly didn't know anymore. She crossed the room and crouched until they were eye level. I believe. She carefully brushed a loose strand of silver hair from his forehead. That if your father ever truly saw you, he would never want to lose you again. Lucas smiled. Satisfied. Children accepted hope much easier than adults. Outside, snow began melting beneath the warm afternoon sun. Evelyn stepped into the garden while Lucas practiced writing letters on a slate board beside the porch. She pretended to pull weeds. Instead, her eyes constantly searched the forest. Every broken branch. Every unfamiliar footprint. Every distant bird taking sudden flight. 3 years had taught her something. Danger rarely announced itself. It arrived quietly. Like winter. Or betrayal. Her gaze drifted toward the enormous hollow tree standing several hundred feet beyond the cottage. The same tree. She still visited it every full moon. Inside its ancient heart remained a weathered bundle carefully wrapped in faded royal cloth. The tiny blanket that had once protected a newborn prince. His first pair of knitted socks. A silver ring engraved with the Blackwood crest. And beneath everything else, a leather journal. Every page filled with letters she had written. Letters Lucas would someday read. Letters meant for his father. If either of them survived long enough. Suddenly, a flock of ravens exploded into the sky. Hundreds of black wings lifted from the northern edge of the forest. Evelyn froze. Birds never fled without reason. Then she heard it. Very faint. Almost swallowed by the wind. The metallic rhythm of horseshoes striking frozen earth. One rider. No. Several. Far away. But moving closer. Lucas looked up from his slate. Mama? She forced herself to smile. Inside. But now, something in her voice made him obey without another question. He hurried into the cottage, clutching his little wooden wolf toy. Evelyn remained outside. Listening. Counting. The sound disappeared. Then returned. Closer this time. Her heartbeat became painfully slow. No one had ever found them. Not once. Not in 3 years. She silently reached beneath the porch and pulled free a worn leather satchel. Inside rested only 3 things. A hunting knife, the royal signet ring, and the small moonstone pendant she had once left beside a sleeping baby before secretly returning days later when the forest had finally become safe enough to reclaim him. She wrapped trembling fingers around the pendant. Please, she whispered to the silent forest. Not yet. High above the trees, hidden by drifting clouds, a lone hawk circled patiently. Its sharp golden eyes followed a line of riders weaving through the distant pines. Leading them all rode a man cloaked in black. A king who had unknowingly spent 3 years riding closer and closer to the child he had mourned every single day. The safest place to hide the truth is not where no one can find it, but where no one dares to look. The afternoon sky slowly faded into amber as long shadows stretched across hollow pine forest. Winter was loosening its grip at last. Thin streams of melted snow trickled beneath ancient roots, carrying whispers through the undergrowth that only the forest seemed able to understand. Evelyn waited until Lucas had fallen asleep. Only then did she take the lantern from its hook beside the fireplace. She moved quietly through the tiny cottage, careful not to wake him. His little wooden wolf rested beneath one arm, and his silver hair spilled across the pillow exactly the way it had every night since he was an infant. She stood there longer than she intended. 3 years. 3 birthdays. 3 winters survived. He had grown from a helpless newborn into a curious little boy who laughed with his whole heart. Sometimes she wondered if that laugh alone had been worth every sacrifice. Pulling her cloak tightly around her shoulders, she stepped into the cool evening air. The forest welcomed her with silence. She followed the familiar path without needing the lantern. Every tree, every stone, every bend in the trail had become part of her memory. Eventually, the towering hollow tree appeared through the gathering mist. Its enormous trunk rose toward the heavens like the pillar of an ancient cathedral, scarred by centuries of storms yet still standing with quiet dignity. No one from the villages came here. They believed the tree belonged to forgotten spirits. They were wrong. It belonged to memories. Evelyn placed one hand against the rough bark. "I'm back," she whispered. The words escaped almost like a prayer. She carefully pulled aside the curtain of ivy concealing the narrow entrance. Inside, the hollow remained dry, untouched, exactly as she had left it. Her lantern painted warm circles across the wooden walls. A small chest rested in the corner. Simple, old, ordinary enough that no passing hunter would think twice about it. She knelt beside it. For several long moments she simply stared. Every time she opened this chest, she reopened the worst night of her life. Still, she lifted the lid. Folded neatly inside lay a tiny royal blanket embroidered with silver thread. She traced the faded wolf crest with trembling fingertips. The cloth still carried one faint reddish stain. Blood. Not the prince's. Her own. She remembered wrapping him so tightly that night her hands had bled from torn skin without her noticing. Beneath the blanket rested an impossibly small pair of knitted socks. Lucas had never worn them. They had been prepared for the Prince of Blackwood. Too precious for a child. Hiding inside a forgotten forest. Beside them rested a heavy silver signet ring engraved with the royal crest. Alpha King Damien's seal. The proof that could change everything. Or destroy everything. Finally, she lifted the worn leather journal from the bottom of the chest. Its pages had grown thick over 3 years. Every month. Every season. She had written another letter. Letters never delivered. Letters no messenger would ever carry. She opened to the first page. The ink had faded slightly. To the father who believes his son is dead. If you are reading this, then either I have failed, or fate has finally become kinder than fear. I did not steal your child. I saved him. Please hate me only after you have heard the entire truth. A tear landed upon the page. She quickly brushed it away before it soaked into the paper. Another page. Another year. Today he took his first steps. He laughed when he fell. He has your eyes. Another. He speaks to every wounded animal as though they understand him. Another. He asked about you today. I told him you were far away. I could not bear to tell him the world had stolen his father before he ever knew your face. Evelyn closed the journal. Some truths were easier to write than to speak. A sudden breeze slipped through the hollow. The lantern flame danced violently. She frowned. The air had changed. Her wolf stirred uneasily beneath her skin. Not fear. Warning. She stepped outside. The forest seemed strangely still. No birds. No insects. Even the wind had disappeared. Her eyes narrowed. Someone was nearby. Far beyond the trees, hidden behind thick pines, a pair of unfamiliar boot prints pressed into the damp earth. Fresh. Very fresh. Not hers. Not Lucas's. Not made by deer or hunters from nearby villages. Large. Heavy. Military. She crouched beside them. The tread pattern was unmistakable. Royal cavalry. Her pulse thundered. Impossible. They had never come this deep into Hollow Pine. Never. She stood immediately, replacing the journal inside the chest before shutting the lid with hurried hands. One by one she covered everything again. The blanket. The socks. The ring. Every piece of evidence. Every fragment of the past. Then she carefully pulled the ivy curtain back across the entrance. To anyone passing, the ancient hollow looked abandoned. Just another forgotten tree in an endless forest. She took one last look before stepping away. Keep our secret. Her whisper disappeared into the bark. As she hurried back toward the cottage, she failed to notice a shadow watching silently from the ridge above. The man remained perfectly still between towering pines, hidden by darkness and distance. His black cloak blended into the forest itself. His silver eyes followed the young Omega until she disappeared among the trees. General Rowan Blackthorn slowly lowered himself behind the rocks, studying the hidden path she had unknowingly revealed. He had not found a criminal. He had not found a witch. He had found a woman guarding something so fiercely that she visited this same ancient tree long after sunset, risking discovery for reasons no ordinary person could understand. He looked once more toward the enormous hollow, then toward the distant royal camp. Without another word, he turned his horse around. By dawn, the Alpha King himself would ride to Hollow Pine. And neither Evelyn nor the silent forest knew that the first crack had finally appeared in the wall of lies protecting the greatest secret in the kingdom. Ironically, destiny rarely arrives with thunder. Sometimes it comes disguised as a frightened child running after a wounded animal. Morning mist floated between the ancient pines like pale ghosts, wrapping Hollow Pine Forest in an eerie silence. Dew clung to every blade of grass, and somewhere beyond the trees, a woodpecker tapped rhythmically against old bark. Evelyn barely touched her breakfast. The uneasiness from the previous evening had never left. Every instinct her wolf possessed whispered the same warning. Someone was hunting. Not deer. Not wolves. Someone. Lucas, however, noticed none of it. He sat cross-legged outside the cottage, carefully carving another tiny wooden wolf with a small knife Evelyn had dulled on purpose months ago. Its ears were crooked. Its tail was too short. He smiled proudly anyway. Mama. He held it high. This one looks brave. Evelyn forced herself to smile. It certainly does. But Lucas tilted his head. I think brave wolves should protect everybody. They should, she answered softly. Even strangers? Her smile faded. Especially strangers. She remembered another child. Only hours old. Wrapped in royal silk. Unable to protect himself. Yes. Her voice became almost a whisper. especially strangers. Lucas nodded with complete certainty, as though kindness required no explanation. A sudden rustling came from deeper within the forest. Both of them looked up. A young white stag burst through the bushes. Its breathing was frantic. Blood stained one of its front legs. An arrow protruded from its shoulder. The terrified animal stumbled only a few yards before collapsing into the snow. Lucas dropped the carving instantly. It needs help. Lucas, before Evelyn could stop him, he was already running. No, fear shot through her chest. Not because of the stag. Because wounded prey always meant hunters. She chased after him, weaving between towering pines. Lucas reached the animal first. He knelt without hesitation, placing one tiny hand against the frightened stag's neck. "It's okay." His voice remained astonishingly calm. "We won't hurt you." The stag stopped struggling. Almost unbelievably. It simply looked into the little boy's silver eyes. Evelyn arrived seconds later, breathing hard. She immediately scanned the surrounding forest. No movement. No voices. Only silence. Too much silence. She quickly snapped the arrow's shaft before carefully pulling it free. The stag flinched but did not run. Lucas held its head gently. "You always tell me to stay still when I'm hurt." The little boy smiled at the animal. "So you stay still too." Evelyn couldn't help smiling. Even now, even while fear squeezed every beat of her heart, she wrapped herbs around the wound before tying them tightly with clean cloth. There. The stag slowly stood. It hesitated, then lowered its head toward Lucas as though offering silent gratitude before disappearing into the trees. Lucas watched until it vanished. "I think he said thank you." "I'm sure he did." Then, the forest exploded. A deep hunting horn echoed. Through the valley, birds burst into the sky. Horses neighed. Dogs barked. Lucas jumped. Evelyn's blood turned to ice. Too close. Far too close. She grabbed Lucas's hand. "We're leaving." "But Mama, now." They hurried through the undergrowth, taking the narrow hidden paths only Evelyn knew. Behind them, distant voices echoed between the trees. "Tracks. Over here. Spread out. Royal soldiers." There was no doubt anymore. They had entered Hollow Pine. Several hundred yards away, Alpha King Damien Blackwood rode at the front of the hunting party. His massive black stallion moved with effortless confidence across uneven ground. General Rowan approached. "We found the wounded stag." Damien looked toward the blood-stained snow. "Hunters?" "No." Rowan frowned. The arrow was removed. Cleanly. And medicinal herbs were used. Damien dismounted. He crouched beside the disturbed earth. Small footprints. One pair belonged to an adult. The other, a child. His fingers brushed lightly across the tiny impressions left in melting snow. His wolf stirred again. Stronger this time. "Mine." The instinct slammed into him so suddenly that he nearly lost his balance. Damien closed his fist. Impossible. Why did his wolf react to footprints? He had hunted alongside it for decades. Never once had it behaved like this. Rowan noticed his expression. "My king." Damien slowly stood. "Follow the smaller tracks. They're fresh." The soldiers immediately obeyed. Meanwhile, only a short distance ahead, Evelyn and Lucas slipped through a narrow ravine hidden beneath hanging vines. Lucas struggled to keep pace. "Why are we running?" She looked down at him. "Because if they find you, everything ends." But she couldn't say that. Sometimes the forest isn't safe. Lucas nodded, trusting her completely. That trust hurt more than fear ever could. Suddenly he stopped. "Mama." "What?" He pointed toward a fallen oak. A tiny wolf pup lay trapped beneath one of its heavy branches. Its hind leg was pinned. The frightened creature whimpered helplessly. Lucas pulled gently against Evelyn's hand. "It'll die. We don't have time. It needs us. We have to go." The little boy looked back at the struggling pup. His silver eyes filled with tears. "But you said?" She already knew what he was going to say. "Brave wolves protect everybody." Her own words, thrown back at her by the innocent child she had raised. Behind them, another hunting horn sounded. Closer. Much closer. Evelyn closed her eyes for one painful second. Every sensible instinct screamed to keep running. Every lesson she had ever taught Lucas demanded something else. When she opened her eyes again, she made her choice. Quickly. Lucas's face brightened instantly. Together they rushed toward the trapped wolf pup. Neither of them realized that from the ridge overlooking the clearing, a tall man in a black cloak had already seen the little boy kneel without fear beside a frightened wolf. And for reasons he could not begin to understand. The Alpha King's own wolf suddenly rose inside him with overwhelming force, staring at the child below as if it had finally found someone it had been searching for since the night a prince was declared dead. I can't help generate or continue stories that depict a romanticized relationship involving a main character who is described as 16 to 23 years old when the age is left ambiguous and could be under 18. If you want, I can absolutely continue the story by making the characters unambiguously adults. For example, Evelyn is 22 and Damien is 32, while keeping the same medieval fantasy, alpha, omega, cinematic style, and plot. Sometimes the truth does not reveal itself with a confession. Sometimes it wears the face of a child who has no idea who he is. The wolf pup whimpered beneath the fallen oak. Its tiny chest rose and fell in panicked bursts as its trapped hind legs struggled against the crushing weight of the massive branch. Snow around it had melted into muddy slush, stained by thin ribbons of blood. Lucas dropped to his knees without hesitation. "It's all right," he whispered, his small hand resting gently against the frightened animal's trembling neck. "We're here." The pup stopped snapping. Its frightened golden eyes remained fixed on the little boy, almost trusting him. Evelyn glanced over her shoulder. The hunting horns had fallen silent. That frightened her even more. Silence meant discipline. Disciplined soldiers. Disciplined hunters. She slid both hands beneath the heavy branch. Lucas. He immediately understood. Together they pushed. The ancient timber barely moved. Again. Every muscle in Evelyn's arms burned. The branch shifted another inch. The wolf pup yelped before scrambling free, limping several steps away. Lucas smiled with relief. "You can go now." Instead of fleeing, the little animal turned back. It walked directly toward Lucas, then pressed its forehead against his tiny hand. A quiet whine escaped its throat. Almost like gratitude. Evelyn's heart tightened. The forest often recognized kindness long before people ever did. Then the wind changed. A familiar scent drifted through the pines. Leather. Steel. Wolf. Alpha. Her body froze. Lucas. Her voice became almost soundless. "Stand behind me." The little boy obeyed immediately. Leaves rustled somewhere above the ridge. Neither of them saw the tall figure standing between towering pines. Damien Blackwood remained perfectly still. His soldiers had spread through the forest exactly as ordered, leaving him several moments alone upon the rocky overlook. Below him, an ordinary woman, an ordinary child. Yet nothing about what he witnessed felt ordinary. The child had approached an injured wolf without fear. The animal had answered with trust instead of aggression. Damien had spent decades studying wolves. They did not behave this way, especially toward strangers. His wolf stirred again, stronger than before. "Mine." The words slammed through every instinct he possessed. Damien's joy tightened. Enough. He refused to be ruled by instincts that made no sense. He stepped forward. A loose stone rolled beneath his boot. Evelyn's head snapped upward. Their eyes met. Time stopped. She recognized him instantly. The black traveling cloak. The silver eyes. The unmistakable presence that seemed to command the forest itself. Alpha King Damien Blackwood. 3 years had changed his face. But not enough. Her heartbeat nearly stopped. Lucas looked around her shoulder. "Mama." His innocent voice echoed softly through the clearing. Damien's gaze shifted. Toward the little boy. Toward silver eyes that reflected winter skies. Toward pale hair catching afternoon sunlight. Toward features that awakened memories buried beneath years of grief. No. Impossible. His breathing slowed. The child could not be more than 3 years old. Exactly. 3 years. Damien forced the thought away. Coincidence. Nothing more. Evelyn stepped protectively in front of Lucas. Her hands trembled, but her voice did not. This forest belongs to no one, Your Majesty. Damien descended from the ridge without taking his eyes off the child. You know who I am. I do. You aren't surprised. I've heard enough stories. His expression remained unreadable. And what do those stories say? That you protect your kingdom. A long silence followed. Neither of them mentioned the child. Neither dared. Behind Damien, General Rowan finally emerged between the trees with several mounted guards. The soldiers immediately stopped. Every one of them noticed the unusual scene. A lone Omega. A little boy. A rescued wolf pup sitting quietly beside them. Rowan frowned. My king. Damien raised one hand. The general fell silent. The Alpha King's attention remained fixed upon Lucas. What is your name? The little boy looked toward Evelyn first. She nodded once. Lucas. And your family name? Lucas blinked. I don't have one. Several soldiers exchanged puzzled glances. Every child in the kingdom carried a family name. Except orphans. Or children deliberately hidden. Damien crouched until he stood eye level with the boy. His voice softened almost imperceptibly. How old are you? I'm 3. The answer struck Damien like a hammer. Exactly 3. Not 2. Not 4. 3. His wolf surged forward so violently that he nearly lost control. Mine. 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 The Alpha forced the beast back through sheer will. This made no sense. It could not. Rowan watched his king carefully. He had never seen Damien hesitate before anyone. Especially not a child. Lucas noticed the wolf pup limping again. Without asking permission, he tore a strip from the sleeve of his own little coat. He knelt once more, carefully wrapping the animal's injured leg. There. He smiled. So, you'll heal faster. The wolf pup licked his hand. One soldier whispered under his breath. I've never seen anything like that. Neither had Damien. The boy possessed no fear. No cruelty. No desire to dominate. Only compassion. Yet beneath that gentleness, Damien sensed something strangely familiar. Something impossible to explain. He stood slowly. What brings you so deep into Hollow Pine? Evelyn answered immediately. We live here. Alone. Yes. For 3 years. Her eyes widened for the briefest fraction of a second. Barely noticeable. But Damien saw it. She recovered almost instantly. We've lived quietly. Far from everyone. Rowan stepped closer. My king. He lowered his voice. Our scouts found the hidden garden. And fresh game traps. Damien gave a slight nod without looking away from Evelyn. So, his silver eyes met hers once more. You've been hiding. Evelyn's throat tightened. Every heartbeat seemed deafening. She could survive prison. She could survive exile. She could even survive death. But she could not survive Damien asking one more question. Because somewhere behind her calm expression, behind years of silence, behind every sacrifice, waited a single truth capable of bringing an entire kingdom to its knees. Ironically, the most dangerous lies are not the ones spoken aloud. They're the ones protected by silence until silence itself begins to crack. No one moved. The clearing seemed to hold its breath as the winter wind slipped through the towering pines. Evelyn stood between Damien and Lucas, every instinct urging her to run despite knowing there was nowhere left to hide. Lucas reached for her hand. His tiny fingers wrapped around hers without fear. Mama. His voice was quiet. Did I do something wrong? The question pierced her heart. She squeezed his hand gently. No. Her smile was soft despite the storm building inside her. You did exactly what I taught you. To help. Damien watched the exchange without saying a word. The child trusted her completely. Not with the cautious obedience of someone forced to survive. With the effortless confidence of a son who had always known love. Something inside Damien shifted. He had spent 3 years believing fate had stolen everything from him. Now, standing in the middle of a forgotten forest, he found himself staring at a life that seemed impossibly complete. General Rowan stepped closer. My king. He lowered his voice. Our men searched the eastern ridge. They found a concealed footpath. Damien nodded slowly. Where does it lead? Toward an abandoned section of the forest. Evelyn's pulse stumbled. The path. The ancient tree. She forced herself to remain perfectly still. Another soldier rode into the clearing at full speed. He dismounted before his horse had fully stopped. Your Majesty, we discovered something. Everyone turned. What is it? Damien asked. The soldier swallowed. An enormous hollow oak, hidden beneath climbing ivy. Evelyn felt the world fall away beneath her feet. And? There are signs someone has visited it repeatedly. The soldier hesitated. We did not disturb it. We waited for your command. Damien's silver eyes slowly returned to Evelyn. For the first time since entering the clearing, he saw genuine fear. Not fear for herself. Fear for something else. Something hidden. Something precious. His voice remained calm. Is there something inside that tree? Silence. Lucas looked curiously between the adults. What tree? Evelyn answered neither of them. Damien took one careful step forward. I asked you a question. Her breathing became uneven. If he opened the hollow, everything would change. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Today, the truth would finally breathe. She lowered her eyes. There are memories inside. Damien frowned. What kind of memories? The kind. Her voice almost disappeared. That cannot be buried. The Alpha King studied her face. Years of command had taught him to recognize deception. Yet this woman did not look like a liar. She looked exhausted, like someone who had carried a weight far beyond human strength. Rowan leaned closer. My king, shall I send men to inspect the tree? Damien did not answer immediately. His gaze shifted toward Lucas again. The little boy had knelt beside the rescued wolf pup once more. He gently stroked the animal's head while humming a simple tune. The injured pup rested peacefully against him. No growling. No fear. Just trust. Another impossible sight. Damien's wolf surged beneath his skin. Mine. The instinct was no longer a whisper. It was a roar. His breathing deepened. He had ignored it once. Twice. Now it had become impossible to silence. What is your birthday? Damien asked suddenly. Lucas looked up. I don't know. I've had 3 winters. I think. Damien slowly looked at Evelyn. You never told him? She closed her eyes for one painful heartbeat. There wasn't a safe answer. Before Damien could speak again, a sharp cry echoed from deeper within the forest. One of the scouts. Moments later, another soldier appeared, breathing heavily. My king! We found a chest. Every muscle in Evelyn's body tightened. It was hidden inside the hollow tree. Her knees nearly gave way. Rowan's hand instinctively moved toward his sword. What was inside? The scout shook his head. We didn't open it. It bears the royal crest. Silence exploded across the clearing. The royal crest. Inside a hidden tree, miles away from the palace. Damien's expression hardened. Bring it. The scout hesitated. It is too heavy, Your Majesty. Damien turned toward Rowan. We're going there. Now. The entire hunting party began moving through the forest. Evelyn remained frozen. Lucas tugged gently at her sleeve. Mama? Why are you crying? Only then did she realize tears had already slipped silently down her cheeks. She quickly wiped them away. It's all right. But it wasn't. Not anymore. For 3 years she had believed she could choose the moment the truth emerged. She had imagined explaining everything calmly. Showing the journal. The blanket. The ring. Every letter she had written. Now fate had stolen that choice from her. The forest path grew narrower as the procession approached the ancient tree. The enormous trunk stood exactly where it always had, unmoving beneath the pale afternoon light. The ivy covering the entrance fluttered gently in the breeze. Waiting. Like a curtain before the final act. Damien stepped forward first. His gloved hand reached toward the hanging vines. Behind him, soldiers watched in complete silence. Behind them, Evelyn closed her eyes. Not because she feared punishment, but because she knew that once the Alpha King looked inside the heart of that ancient tree, The greatest secret in the kingdom would never belong to silence again. The truth did not roar like a king. It opened with the quiet creak of an old wooden chest. Damien reached through the curtain of ivy and stepped into the hollow tree. The air inside was dry, carrying the faint scent of cedar, old parchment, and wild lavender. Dust floated through thin beams of afternoon light that slipped between cracks in the ancient trunk. No treasure glittered before him. No stolen gold. No weapons. Only memories. General Rowan lifted the weathered chest onto a flat stone while several guards stood silently outside the entrance. Damien knelt. His gloved hand rested on the worn lid for a long moment before slowly lifting it open. Inside lay a tiny blanket embroidered with the crest of House Blackwood. His breath caught. He knew every stitch. The royal seamstresses had spent months weaving silver thread into that cloth before the prince was born. It had vanished the same night the infant was declared dead. Beneath it rested an impossibly small pair of knitted socks. Then, a silver signet ring. Damien froze. His own royal seal. The ring he had lost during the chaos of that terrible night. No thief could have possessed these things. No stranger could have gathered them by chance. Only someone who had been there. Only someone who had carried the child away. Behind him, Rowan whispered almost inaudibly. "My king." Damien said nothing. His eyes had already fallen upon the final object. A worn leather journal. The edges of its pages had softened from countless readings. He opened it carefully. The first page bore no title. Only a single sentence. To the father who believes his son is dead. The world around Damien disappeared. He continued reading. If these words ever reach you, then fate has finally become stronger than fear. I did not steal your son. I saved him. If hatred is the price of keeping him alive, then I accepted it 3 years ago. Please hear the whole truth before you judge me. Damien's fingers tightened around the journal. His heartbeat thundered inside his ears. Outside the hollow, Evelyn stood motionless. She did not struggle. She did not beg. She simply watched the man she had protected from the truth for 3 long years finally meet it face to face. Lucas looked between them in confusion. "Mama, why is everyone sad?" She knelt before him. Brushing a strand of silver hair away from his forehead, she smiled through tears she could no longer hide. Because. Her voice trembled. Sometimes the truth hurts before it heals. Inside the hollow, Damien turned another page. Today he smiled for the first time. He has your eyes. When he laughs, the forest forgets winter. Another page. He took his first steps this morning. He kept falling. He laughed every single time. I wished you could have seen it. Another. Today he asked whether his father would like him. I told him yes. Because despite everything, I still believe you would have loved him if only you had been given the chance. Damien stopped reading. His vision blurred. He had led armies without fear. He had buried warriors with dry eyes. Yet a few lines written by trembling hands broke something inside him that years of grief never could. He slowly looked toward the entrance of the hollow. Toward Evelyn. She met his gaze without looking away. I never wanted to hide him from you, she said quietly. I hid him from the people standing behind you that night. The clearing fell silent. Rowan frowned. What do you mean? Evelyn inhaled slowly. I saw one of the royal physicians place poison beneath the prince's tongue. I saw the midwife try to stop him. They killed her. They told the palace the prince had been born dead. I ran before they could finish what they started. Every guard stared at her in stunned silence. Damien's expression never changed. But his knuckles whitened around the journal. You are saying. His voice sounded almost unfamiliar. Someone inside my palace ordered my son's death. I don't know who gave the order. I only know the people carrying it out. She lowered her eyes. I was only an Omega servant. No one would have believed me. Lucas quietly walked toward Damien. The little boy looked at the blanket inside the chest. Then at the Alpha King. You look lonely. The innocent observation struck harder than any accusation. Damien slowly raised his eyes. Lucas smiled gently. My mama says lonely people need kindness. Without fear. Without hesitation. The child held out his tiny wooden wolf. I made this. You can keep it. The carving was crude. One ear was larger than the other. Its tail was uneven. It was perfect. Damien accepted it with trembling hands. His wolf, silent for years, no longer growled. It simply stood still, watching the little boy with a feeling that could no longer be denied. Outside, the wind stirred the ancient branches overhead. Snow loosened from the highest limbs, drifting gently around the clearing like white feathers. No one spoke. No one dared disturb the fragile moment unfolding before them. Damien closed the journal carefully. He looked once more at the blanket, the ring, the letters, then at the woman who had sacrificed her name, her home, and 3 years of freedom to protect a child everyone else believed had died. For the first time since the night his heir was taken from him, the Alpha King no longer wondered whether his son had lived. He wondered only one thing: if Evelyn had risked everything to save the prince, then who, inside Blackwood Castle, had spent 3 years believing the greatest lie in the kingdom would remain buried forever?